Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The UFC. Do you recognize that? Ultimate Fighting Champion. It's a new sport. Well, old sport, new sport. I've never actually seen it, but I've reported a little bit on it. It's very popular. It's extremely popular. And it's owned, the UFC, by a couple of enterprising brothers, Fertitta brothers. They own something else. Well, actually, they own a lot more, but they own casinos in Las Vegas. Therein lies the beginning of this drama. Jillian K. Melchior from the National Review Online joins. This is a story of how unions work in the 21st century. It's about the money, follow the money, but there's some colorful aspects here. Jillian, a very good evening to you. You've pointed me to some YouTubes that are sensational in the harassment of casino visitors, casino patrons, going through the front doors of a casino, I'm presuming owned by the Fertitta brothers. How does that harassment by the culinary union, how does that connect to the UFC? That's the part of the formula. I don't have big think like union bosses. How does it work? Good evening to you, Jillian.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Well, it's quite a complicated story. So in Nevada, there's a union called the Culinary Union.
Culinary Union. They're cooks. They work in the kitchen area, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, it does restaurant workers, bartenders, waiters.
This is local 226 of Las Vegas.
Yep. And so the Culinary Union has wanted to get into station casinos for a long time. Station casinos is a set of casinos that caters to Nevada's local gamblers. Well, Station Casinos is owned by the Fertitta brothers, and the Fertitta brothers also own the UFC, which is a mixed martial arts competitive sport, fastest growing sport in the world, and really fun to watch. So basically at Station Casinos, the Las Vegas Culinary Union wants to get in, but they don't really have enough support to win in a secret ballot vote. So instead what they want to do is a card check vote, and that basically means that every worker's vote, yay or nay, that would be public. And that really opens people up to intimidation. And you really see that playing through because at another hotel called the Cosmopolitan Hotel in the last month, the Culinary Union started harassing tourists, calling them names that I can't even say on the radio. Right.
I saw that video. And so the Culinary Union wants a vote that it could win with intimidation. This is the Culinary Union Local 226. And if they get an open vote, they can intimidate, they can win it, and they can get into the Fertitta brothers casinos. Have I got it right so far?
That's exactly right.
All right. Now the difficult part is the Ultimate Fighting Champion.
Now it's the tricky part. So the Fertitta brothers know, they're afraid that their workers at station casinos are going to get intimidated.
Right.
So they say absolutely not. You can have a closed ballot where the yay or nay vote is not public, but we're not doing card check. So the UFC is, remember, the Fertitta brothers' other business property, totally separate from the casinos.
It's a cash machine. They're printing money.
Yeah, it's very, very popular. But the Culinary Union knows that this is a very successful sport, and it knows that it's owned by the Fertitta brothers. So because they can't win in Nevada, they can't win at station casinos, the Culinary Union has enlisted a New York assemblyman, Sheldon Silver, to go after the UFC and make sure that the sport isn't legal in New York. So basically all the New York fans miss out.
Did you say Sheldon Silver?
I did.
Why don't you tell everybody that isn't just your ordinary walking around assemblyman?
No, he's Speaker of the New York Assembly.
He's the boss. He runs New York State. Come on, Jillian. Right. Translate. New York governance is the Assembly Speaker, Mr. Silver, for the last 400 years, runs the state.
Yeah, that's right. And he's a union-allied Democrat, so it makes sense that he is enlisted by the Culinary Union. And basically what's happened is professional MMA has been illegal in the state of New York. It's been illegal in a lot of states. But every other state but New York has come around into the 21st century and legalized UFC. But every time that it comes up for a vote in New York, even though UFC has very strong bipartisan support, Sheldon Silver makes sure it never gets to the floor for a vote because he wants to support the Culinary Union in Nevada for this weird proxy war that they have going on with the Fertitta brothers.
Detail. What does MMA stand for?
It stands for mixed martial arts, and it's basically a sport that combines, typical boxing with Muay Thai, with Jiu-Jitsu, all sorts of different combat sports.
So it's a type of sport, and UFC is a league that practices MMA.
That's right. It's one of the most popular ones. And to give you an idea of how popular it is, I mentioned that it's the fastest growing sport in the world. Well, already, every time there's a fight, about 700,000 people in New York City tune in on pay-per-view because they can't watch it here live. And when UFC holds an event in New York, about half the attendees are New Yorkers. So there's very strong demand for it.
And so Sheldon Silver doesn't want to allow an MMA vote to happen because the assembly would vote for it? Because it's going to make a lot of money?
Yeah, it's going to make a ton of money. He doesn't want it because he's got the allegiance with the culinary.
Well, but what doesn't that lose money for New York? Wouldn't this be extremely popular? I mean, just there would be a lot of tax revenue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Statewide, the estimate is that if they legalize professional MMA, it would generate at least $40 million a year in economic
all right, what is the explanation for banning it, since the real explanation is an obscure connection to Local 226 in Las Vegas? How do they ban this? Do they claim that it's cruel? Do they talk about how many silver foxes die? What is the explanation?
Well, they've had two ongoing ones, and I think both of them are pretty faulty. The first one is they take an offense with some of the comments that UFC fighters have said. I think a lot of the UFC fighters are great. They're wonderful role models. Every once in a while, if you've got 400 fighters, one of them is going to say something offensive. But I think it's really interesting to note that the Culinary Union doesn't make a similar stink about the misconduct of athletes in other sports. So that's one tip off right away that it's
the NFL would be banned from New York if one person's bad remarks was enough, right?
You're absolutely right. And the other complaint that they kind of levied to win this battle is that the UFC is too violent. But there are a couple reasons to question that, too. First is boxing and football are both at least as dangerous. Boxing in particular, MMA, when there are blows, when they're fighting, they're concentrated all throughout the body because you've got kickboxing involved, you've got wrestling. It's not just a guy punching another guy in the head.
A detail, Jillian, because you've watched this. Is the UFC or MMA, is it fixed the way some people say wrestling is?
Well, that's a funny question because the last fight out in Las Vegas, the one that I was just out watching, it ended up being a bit of a twist ending. George St. Pierre, who's the longest-reigning UFC champion in history, the crowd thought he was defeated. Promoters thought he was defeated, but the judges in Las Vegas, who is worth saying are independent from the UFC, decided to give him the victory.
So there's something of the show business to UFC.
Well, they're trying to make it a legitimate sport, and they're doing a pretty good job of that.
All right, but right now, Sheldon Silver will not allow the UFC to prosper in New York in order to pressure, well, let's put it this way. The effect of that is that Fertitta Brothers feel pressure in their Las Vegas casinos.
Yep, that's right. It's a very personal fight, and you think that guys that are involved in a professional fighting competition are pretty tough, but man, I gotta say, this union is giving them a run for the money. It's conducting a dirty fight. It's taking it out of Las Vegas. It's going after them in New York. And I think what really suffers is the New York state economy, the New York fans, and also New York organized workers.
The Culinary Workers Union, Local 226, listening to us right now in Las Vegas. Jillian K. Melchior, writing for the National Review Online, Ultimate Fighting Champion, UFC, Sheldon Silver, the most powerful politician in New York State. I'm John Batchelor.